This film can be a bit of a difficult watch at times, but I was so impressed by the beautiful black and white photography that I thought this 4K deserved a review all of its own. So this is my review of the 4K of David Lynch's masterpiece, The Elephant Man. I saw this film in 1980 when it was first on general release. I must have been 15 or 16 years old at the time, and it did make quite an impression on me. The central core really is built around that fabulous portrayal by John Hurt as John Merrick. Now, his real name was Joseph Merrick, and I don't really know why Dr. Frederick Treves changed his name in his memoir to John Merrick. But since I saw the film as a youngster all those years ago, I've often wondered how on earth it was possible to make such an amazing film about the story of John Merrick. Well, I think I now have the answer, and it's been staring me in the face all these years, and it took a rewatch now to understand it. Just look at the cast in this film. It's quite unbelievable. And you could go into the names like Anthony Hopkins, John Hurt, who I've just mentioned, Hannah Gordon, John Gielgud, but there's one sequence that I had to go back to and have a look at again. Anthony Hopkins, when he first sees the Elephant Man, and the camera is slowly zooming into his face, and just at the right moment, a tear drops down his cheek. Well, the same thing was done with John Hurt later in the film. I think that's when he's presented to Frederick Treves' wife, played by Hannah Gordon. And you just can't wish for acting as perfect as that. But on top of that, the crew, just an amazing job on the makeup. And the first time he put it on, I believe it took 12 hours before they could present John Hurt to the cameras. And at that point, apparently, Anthony Hopkins said, "This is going to work." So you go through the whole crew, Freddie Francis, with the amazing black and white photography and that scope frame. It perfectly captures Victorian London, and this was the same era as the infamous Jack the Ripper murders, of course. So if you could make a Jack the Ripper film that looked like this, I think you'd really have something. But it took an American like David Lynch coming over and looking at the East End of London in Whitechapel as it was then. And it wasn't the Docklands that we know today, which is all developed and bit of a snob hill really, but it's completely different. And back then it was still run down. The industry had all left and it was all dilapidated and decrepit. He went into the old hospital there, saw what it was like, and he immediately, with his vision, he knew how he was going to frame this picture. So that was why this film is so special. There was one downside to me seeing it as a 15 or 16-year-old back in 1980, and that was that I found it so emotional that I've stayed away from it all these years. And it was only a review by my good friend John at Mondo Celovec Movies 4 or 5 months prior to me recording this. He covered his special edition pack that he'd got of The Elephant Man, and he really encouraged me to want to see it again. I'd always remembered it as a great film and I had great affection for it. I'd seen bits and pieces, but I'd managed to avoid it all these years. And that's quite amazing really, because it was released on Super 8 and we did show an extract at the British Film Collectors Conventions. But I failed to purchase this feature on Super 8. And so I put the word out to my fellow Super 8 collectors, and Neil Williams came back to me. He did actually purchase this print, and he waxes lyrical about how good it was, how perfect the contrast was. So it sounds almost a bit like a 4K HDR disc. But he did say that his local film society, which he was a part of, they'd hired a 16mm print of The Elephant Man, and the Super 8 represented the good quality of that 16mm just as well. So it was something special, like most of these Duran releases from that period were. But of course the black and white photography, it really does lend itself really well to Super 8. The 4K image quality on this is exceptional. It's black and white, and just like the Super 8, I think it's just worked really well. For me, even in here on a domestic video projector, this is just like looking at a 35mm film print. So that's how it projects in here. I think it's exceptional, and even though this is the more expensive pack that is apparently no longer available, this cost me £35 in our most recent visit to HMV, where they still had one in stock. So if you have a branch of HMV you can get into and you've got one of these in stock, it might be worth getting this. But the ordinary release, which is just the 3-disc pack, none of the extras that this has, is in the 2 for £30 offer, and I just think that's a bargain. The sound is DTS 2.0, the screen ratio is 2.4 to 1 or thereabouts. But I had a subscriber mention to me recently that his modern Dolby Atmos decoder amplifier receiver, a Marantz, was not capable of decoding what we used to know as Dolby Prologic. Now, as I say, this is DTS2, but of course it's the same matrixed stereo 4-channel sound that we would have got when this film was current. So Laserdisc, DVD, anything that went before VHS that had 2-channel matrix stereo should decode into Prologic, or Dolby Stereo as it was known at cinemas. Now, I've just checked this out on my older equipment, actually in the living room, and I was getting Dolby Prologic. So if you are having trouble with that, I suggest you hook up a couple of analog hi-fi interconnects and you connect that to your amplifier, tell it it is analog sound, and you should get the full surround sound effect, and it sounds pretty exceptional to me. The opening of this film features some optical composite shots of a perception of Joseph Merrick's mother being trampled by elephants, and so the image quality at that point is not as good as it is once the opticals are finished. And there is one other place, there might be a couple of other places where certainly early on there's a photograph of Joseph Merrick's mother and the camera zooms into it and it seems to get some video noise on that photograph. It might be excessive film grain, I don't really know, but there's just a couple of places to beware. The image quality, you might think, oh, this isn't very good, but rest assured it's either something has gone wrong with the shot or the translation to video, or it's an optical. It's the usual thing with film. If you use opticals to get 2 or more images into one shot using a multiplexer, then you are going to get degradation of the image quality. Both packs of The Elephant Man come with a 3rd disc that contain a host of extras, but there are a couple of extras on the main disc and it's duplicated between the 4K and the Blu-ray. They're both identical. One of them is an interview with the on-set photographer Frank Connor, and he details how he got some of these amazing pictures on The Elephant Man, and contrary to what many people believe, these are not stills lifted out of 35mm. This is the photographer coming in after he's seen what could be an interesting photograph and asking the actors to resume their positions to get that snap. And I believe that's what the art cards in this special pack are. There's 5 of them and they really are quite special. The other extra on the main disc is the interview with the producer at the National Film Theatre, and that is extremely interesting. That's one of the things I like about the British Film Institute lectures and interviews. They ask a question, then they let the interviewee actually speak, and then you get all the information that you could ever wish for about one of your favourite films, and this is no exception. So well worth watching, as are all the extras on this release. So I don't think you'd be surprised to find out that my conclusion of this 4K release is that it's a must-buy. Anyone who loves great movies is going to love this. Now, it can be a hard watch at times, as I say, but I'm pretty sure anyone, even if you've been blubbing your eyes out through this, at the end of it, you're going to think you've just watched something special. There's been a few developments since I put up my review of Apocalypse Now, because that 4K really is exceptional for a 35mm print, and we've had a couple of reviews from Leon Talks Film and Mondo Celovec Movies that I'd arranged with them prior to. But also, let me check my notes here because this is quite a convoluted title and I don't want to get it wrong. Alex is in America, the Trailer Project and Alex's Other Movies. Now, he's got a unique perspective of reviewing films via the trailers, and so I asked him if he'd do something if he hadn't reviewed Apocalypse Now before, and he thought that was a good idea, and he contacted me overnight. He's done his review, and I must say I thoroughly enjoyed it, so I'll put a link to that in the description below. It's well worth a watch if, like me, you're rather obsessed with Apocalypse Now. But also, the final thing I want to mention, I'll feature this a bit later, but Keith at Euphoria Pictures sent me something rather special. This is a V for Vendetta steelbook from Titans of Cult. It's a real thing of beauty, like some other steelbooks I've featured recently, but I think that's going to feature in a roundup review like I did recently at the end of July 2021 when I go through films I've watched in 4K, so maybe I'll do an unboxing of that then. It's really something special to look at. But anyway, Keith has uploaded another one of his great videos, and there was one a month or so back where he featured a film called Street Trash, which I've never seen, and I want to see it after that review because it looks so awful. And the way he dealt with that Blu-ray and another one that he didn't like in that video, that had me choking with laughter while I was eating my dinner. Well, anyway, he put up another video which I saw yesterday. And I'm going to point you to that, and please watch it to the end, because he's got another couple of Blu-rays in from Germany, I think, that he doesn't particularly like. And so he's got a rather unique way of doing that, and he's got a topper at the end of it anyway, and I'm going to point you to that. Have a watch of that video and stick with it to the end. I think you'll get a really good laugh, just like I did. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and perhaps consider subscribing, so I'll be encouraged to create even more content like this again in the future. Until the next video, bye bye for now.